Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Grandma's Games Lab. If you can hear the sound of my voice, guess what? That means you clicked on a couple of links and it's your lucky day because this is Grandma's Games Lab, and today we're talking about games, brains, and gambling. Oh my, this should be fun. This has definitely been a lot of fun to research, that's for sure. So I hope that you can hear the sound of my voice. If not, well, golly, there's not a whole lot I can do about that, is there? Wolfie Haku, good morning, my love. Welcome. Oh, I'm so glad you made it. It was so weird. It said there were 4 people waiting for the stream, and now it shows there's no one watching. Maybe I should not have that on concurrent viewers. Let's see. Views? No. I don't know how to work the YouTube stuff, so I'm just going to let it do its thing. Welcome in. I appreciate your company. Okay. Okay, by the way, for those of you who are watching through the Patreon, who cannot see the YouTube chat, Wolfie Haku has sounded an air horn just using text. I think that's funnier than when I do the whole mouth sounds. Um, so yeah, this has been kind of tough. It can be a little bit dark to do research on gambling, and then when you look at games and gambling, there's a whole lot of stuff where it, there's a lot of very biased information out in the world. I mean, down to the point where when you look at the definition of gambling from Wikipedia, in fact, let's just go look at all that for a second. Um, this is the one I want. Okay, so what we're looking at really is I love games, the history of games, how games affect our brains, and why I believe that in every possible way, games are good for your informational health. And I've definitely been working on theories around the idea that we actually have 3 appetites, not 2. There's not just a nutritional appetite and a libidinal appetite or sexual appetite. There is also an informational appetite. And that really is tied to the way the human brain is structured and the development of our prefrontal cortex. So when we look at gambling, the top text there is from Wikipedia, which is just such a lovely. These are my 2 go-tos when I want to look at, okay, wait, let's get down to the roots of a word. I probably should have checked to see if Words Unraveled had something for me. They do absolutely incredible deep dives on the etymology of words and phrases. But in Wikipedia, they said gambling, also known as betting or gaming, is the wagering of something of value, i.e., the stakes, on a random event with the intent of winning something else of value, where instances of strategy are discounted. That's going to come up important later on in our presentation today. Exploration, experimentation. It's a games lab. We're experimenting. Gambling thus requires 3 elements to be present. There's consideration, an amount wagered, there's risk or chance, and there's a prize. So when we looked at the history of games and gaming, something that showed up in the earliest representations of games were dice, variations on a theme of dice. Will you be discussing the positives of gambling? Absolutely. When it comes to risk reward as a learning tool, yep, that is on the slideshow. Because I think gambling gets the fact that we have one term for risk taking and then another term for gambling. They're really fundamentally the same. And it doesn't necessarily have to be money on the line. The thing is, just like anything out there, you can use a screwdriver to screw in screws. You can also use it to stab somebody in the chest. The presence of the screwdriver is not the problem. And the presence of gambling and risk-taking is not the problem. You know, of course, if somebody has something and you go, oh, wow, I want that thing. And they're like, yeah, it's, it's not my favorite thing. But I mean, if you wanted it, we could wrestle for it, right? Is that gambling? You can use a butter knife to screw in screws. Sure. You can use things for completely unintended purposes. You don't know. Baby, I can use a dime to screw in screws. But the point being, the presence of the screwdriver is not the reason somebody got stabbed in the chest. And if you ever use my butter knife to screw in screws, I will misuse that butter knife. And leave my sewing scissors alone. I don't sew. I don't know who I'm trying to kid here with the idea that I might actually ever have learned to sew. I can barely put a button back on. In fact, I put a button back on with such intensity that the shirt will probably wear out before that button comes off. Anyway, the point, we are going through all of the concepts. I did a ton of research. Okay, whoever you are on Discord, I can't read your message till after we're done. Thank you. All right. Trying to run a live show is fun when it's not a game. It's so much easier when I'm just playing a game. Okay. But the three elements here are important because there's consideration. And like I say, that might be, hey, buddy, I like that hat. Oh, yeah? You want to flip a coin for it? In some ways you could, and I know people are going to come at me and be like, you're oversimplifying. But as much as I have said that jokes are a type of game, jokes are also a type of gambling. Because it involves surprise, which is the prize. For our little primate brains, surprise is a prize. We get a dopamine shot, whoosh. The risk that you take is that it won't be funny. And consideration, meaning the amount wagered, time is money, baby. You paid attention. Man walks into a bar. Man walks into a bar. Man walks into a bar. And now there's got to be some kind of payoff. So you're taking a risk. There's a risk taking by letting somebody tell you a joke. Like the little kid in our neighborhood who would go, ha, what color is a cupcake? Yellow. What? Anyway, Merriam-Webster says it's the practice or activity of betting. Risking money or other stakes in a game or bet is a secondary. Now, I cut and paste that directly from the Merriam-Webster website, and it did not have numbers on it, so I'm putting that responsibility on them. But I have several articles to look at today. I love when I can find university articles and scholarly works. Please, AI, don't delete the internet. Please, AI, don't delete the internet. I think gambling just... in and of its nature, it is hope-seeking and risk-taking, hope-questing and risk-taking combined. You want a thing, and you take a risk to get it. So, key components of gambling, and this is all coming from a study I have on a PDF. This is, I'll put the links in the Patreon. So the cognitive psychology of gambling. I love cognitive psychology. That's what I wanted my master's in. So University of Exeter and Washington Singer Laboratories. This is Mark Griffith's paper, and he is referencing multiple studies. This is a lot of work that was done in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it was really foundational to all of the studies of gambling and why do our little primate brains love to gamble. And I would say it comes from our earliest evolution on the planet. Risk-taking behavior is part of our brain development. So the key components when you're looking at, all right, what constitutes gambling? How is gambling really different from risk-taking? If it is. So Langer's study in 1975 said there's an illusion of control. So an expectancy of a personal success inappropriately higher than the objective probably would warrant. So I would, if I like your hat and you're willing to flip a coin, and if I win, you will give me that hat, then that's money I don't have to give somebody else. Oh, I read it out because that's what I do. I will read out all my slides. I always do. Don't worry about it. um, so what you're doing is you're trying to get something, and this is a whole primate thing. This happens in lesser primates as well as humans. The idea of getting something with the most reward and the least amount of effort is a very instinctive brain function. Oh, okay. Well, I will sometimes, just because it helps to allow me to feel engaged. I can't tell what, if you don't type out exactly what you mean, I don't know what you mean. And I will interpret. So, another key component to this is that there are biased evaluations and erroneous perceptions. This is one of the things that fascinates me the most about humans and human brains, because this kind of is a baked-in thing. This whole study that Griffiths references, there's a whole, it's a fruit machine, slot machine, study that was done, and they're very much the same. Fruit machines, slot machines, interchangeable, one-arm bandit kind of a thing. But people are willing to attribute their success, and then this extends across gambling, to personal factors such as skill, even when this is what's crazy, even when they knew that there was no skill involved in the game, and I'll get back to that. But they will attribute external factors like bad luck for their losses. And so that's an 88 study by Gadbory and Ladouceur. uh, for those of you who are listening as a podcast. Again, I will try to make sure I get all the links. There's about 6 different studies that I looked at today. These, again, we're going through the key components of gambling: the illusion of control, biased evaluations, and erroneous perceptions. So I'm good at this when I'm skilled at it. I'm bad at it when I was really distracted because I didn't get a lot of sleep, or there was the machine is wearing out, or then you get into ancient games with dice and cards, and how often dice and cards and randomizers were connected to the idea of gods and religious concepts. So there's been a spate recently of Norse media, TV shows, and other things like that. The whole idea of the seers and the knuckle bones and do the gods favor you. That is fascinating. I have a personal theory about the evolution of religious concepts and gods and greater beings that I'll get into maybe in another forum, or talk to people in the Patreon about it. And by the way, if you have any questions at all, that you should have the Patreon link. Okay, possibly you don't. But actually, let me pull this up real quick. Come on. Hello? Ba, 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 ba. I can copy that into the chat. The YouTube live stream is being embedded in that Patreon video. But the idea that dice and cards and the earliest parts of gambling, and it's existed as long as games have. So trying to say that gambling is bad is not correct. It's not correct. Gambling can be really detrimental to some people. They can lose everything because they have biased evaluations and erroneous perceptions, in that when they succeed at this thing, it's because they have skill, and when they don't, external factors. I was not being favored by the gods. I was born under a lucky sign. I should never gamble on a Tuesday. Those sorts of things are responsible for their losses. It's not a lack of skill. It's never going to be a lack of skill. And I've had these discussions with other people about the lies that we tell ourselves, and we are hardwired to lie. I don't know why. I really have never completely understood why human brains... Toddlers don't need to be taught to lie. Anyone who's ever been around toddlers and very young people, newly linguistic children, know already. They do not need to be taught to lie. They will lie to you, and they will double down and triple down. And I swear the dinosaur came right through the window and messed up my bed. I know I made my bed. I did it. I did it. It was the dinosaur that came through the window, and It jumped on my bed, and that wasn't me. The ability to dissociate and create a reality that presents the world as you would like it rather than as it isn't even part of prefrontal cortex development, because that's not really a big deal till later. We have an ability to imagine what we want. And the challenge is because we're constantly connecting the dots, creating neuronal pathways in our brains as our brains go. The pathways that get trodden more frequently will be reinforced. And that becomes important, very important. But let's look at how gambling starts roping you in. There's the concept of cognitive regret and the psychology of the near miss. According to Kahneman and Tversky in 1982, the frustration produced by nearly winning induces a form of cognitive regret. I was so close. Okay, you need to roll a 15 to beat this difficulty check. You roll a 2, it's easier to kind of let it go. But when you roll a 14, so close. It hurts a little more. Even though the chances of rolling a 2 and a 14 and a 15 are identical. We can go into probability theory if you want. I nearly went to school to be a statistician. In fact, I still, even though I didn't, took math theory, number theory, and probability and statistics course my first year in college, because it was stuff that I just loved. So that little nugget of cognitive regret when you are so close to a win, 2 lemons and a cherry. Loftus in 83 elaborated on that idea and suggested that the elimination of regret may be achieved by playing again, which is what keeps you rolling. What keeps your quarters going into the machine is that you got so close to the win. Next time will be different. Next time will be different. Next time will be different. And then it's next time will be different on repeat in the gambler's brain. And I think gambling really needs to be destigmatized and allowed to represent all forms of risk-taking, which it normally would. Oh, well, you know, if you're going to go driving out in that snow, you're taking quite the gamble. Yeah, you are. That's a gamble. You could get stuck. The reward could be inappropriately worse instead of inappropriately higher. But it is also fascinating that a lot of people in this study, let me bring this up. I'm not going to put it on the screen right now, but a lot of people who were in this study they were chosen as a group of self-confessed addicted fruit machine gamblers, slot machine gamblers. They were not tested for signs of pathological gambling using the criteria, but it was clear from the initial conversation the criteria would have been fulfilled. During the discussion, all the group commented upon the skillful aspects of fruit machine playing. They claimed they were fully aware that they would lose every penny they possessed in the long run, but their expressed philosophy behind playing was to stay on the machine as long as possible using the least amount of money. So for a lot of people, when they're gambling on those machines, it's kind of how us arcade rats were in the 80s. We weren't ever going to get any money back. But we were going to get to play a long time. Now, were there more components of skill to playing video games? Oh, heck yeah. Sure there were. Sure there were. You could change how you hit buttons. You could learn tactics from other people. But the idea that the same philosophical concept was being used by people who could win money back. Right? Let me read that again. Their expressed philosophy behind playing was to stay on the machine as long as possible using the least amount of money. They wanted entertainment. But the statement implies that the fruit machine playing has an element of skill in that the time taken to lose all your money can be lengthened by skillful playing. And as this study concluded, many people attempted to explain their success as skill. When asked the forced question, is there any skill in playing fruit machines? Only 12% reported there was no skill whatsoever. 48% of the respondents reported there was some degree of skillful activity. You're hitting a button. You're pulling a lever. And yet, our little primate brains will tell us there's a skill, right? You have to flick the button. You have to snap the lever. Pull it really slowly. All right, you have to depress the button at a steady speed. The lies we will tell ourselves. That's the biased evaluations and erroneous perceptions. The lies that we will tell ourselves and believe are the most dangerous lies in the human world. The root of more evils than gambling. So when I looked at risk-taking, a lot of the risk-taking articles focused very heavily on adolescence. So for gambling, there had to be three components. There's a consideration. Here we go. Consideration, a risk, and a prize. Risk-taking is just the risk. It's a risk. The outcome is uncertain. So are you saying it's something that's 50% possible, 50% not possible? Let's look. A surprising or unexpected reward causes an extra dopamine release. So every time we do something with an uncertain outcome, taking a risk, increased dopamine is released while we are determining what happens. This release alerts other parts of the brain that the activity or situation is new and deserves attention. That's what we were talking about before. One of the things that games have offered humans from the beginning of time is exposure to new information. Your opponent makes a move on a board. You now have to reevaluate your strategy. How are you going to look at this? What are you going to do with this? You roll the dice to move your piece on the board. That die roll should be randomized. If you've made your dice well, that die roll should be randomized every time you roll them. The cards you pull out of the deck should be reasonably randomized based on how many cards are in the deck and whether or not cards are returned to the deck or not. If they are not returned to the deck, then probability shifts, and that's why casinos have to use 4 and 5 decks of cards in a card shoe at a time. So we're looking at new information that deserves attention. This is a kind of amplified learning that's actively shaping the connections between neural systems in our brains. So we're forming additional connections. When connections that we already know are activated, that's great. They get deepened, they get strengthened, they get reinforced. When a new situation shows up, we have new dots to connect. And the brain has to go, oh, wait, we're digging a trench now. Hang on. I have to clear some bramble in here to make a path. This is making deer trails in your brain. And if you're familiar with Henry David Thoreau, there's some really good quotes there about thoughts that you want to have dominate your thinking. You have to walk them again and again the same way you would make a path in the woods. And I always think of that as deer trails in the brain. And why that's important in human brains is that when we are faced with circumstances that require an instinctive response, when we are faced with something that scares us, we will gravitate to the pathways that are best cleared. Right? You're going to take the path of least resistance. The one that has the best trail is the path you're going to take. You're not going to try to take the new one. There's a confidence factor once a trail has been reinforced. But new trails, oh my gosh, let's get that dopamine in there. Start running the machete, clearing the bramble out of the way so that we can keep using this new trail. And it's actively shaping the connections between neural systems in our brains. That's coming from the UCLA Center for the Developing Adolescent. This next one I love. The imbalance between the gradual development of the prefrontal cortex, that's one of my favorite brain structures to study, which, among other things, supports self-control and the more rapidly developing limbic system. So, gradual development of the prefrontal cortex, but it's also supporting self-control and the limbic system, which is developing faster, which in turn governs appetite and pleasure seeking. So the limbic system is outpacing the prefrontal cortex. And the limbic system is trying to govern appetite and pleasure seeking. Let's go back to the idea that I'm claiming there are three appetites. There are three appetites: a nutritional appetite, a libidinal or sexual appetite, and an informational appetite. Appetites and pleasure seeking, they go everywhere together. They drive one another. All of that, prefrontal cortex slow, limbic system fast, helps to explain why adolescents are prone to seek novelty and take risks. But it's not just adolescence. It happens more in adolescence because of the influx of hormones. So what I want to do is stop the slideshow for just a second and take a look at the, where's my article? Okay. So the science of risk taking, this is the UCLA article, talks about how dopamine supports learning. I would bring this up. It's not in dark mode, and I'm afraid I'm going to blind everybody. But they have a section in here where they're talking about how dopamine supports learning. And they state, a surprising or unexpected reward causes an extra dopamine release. So every time we do something with an uncertain outcome, i.e. taking a risk, increased dopamine is released while we are determining what happens. The release alerts other parts of the brain that the activity is new and deserves attention. This is a kind of amplified learning that's actively shaping the connections between neural systems in our brains. Because adolescent brains release more dopamine compared to children or adults, adolescents are more sensitive to the rewards and good feelings that come from surprises and new experiences. Although not all adolescents are comfortable with risks, in general, the adolescent reward system is more excited by risks compared to children or adults, which tends to make young people more interested in exploring. So, one of the factors that kicks into that is brain development in that pre-adolescent, adolescent period also involves understanding your place in a social hierarchy. What is your position in your family unit? And we can go back, I'll go back to Maslow all day, every day. Usually your physiological needs by adolescence are being met. Usually your safety needs are being met. So now you are hopefully secured in your initial belonging group, your family group, but you are now looking for achievements and rewards. So you extend your belonging group to include people who are not in your juvenile family group. You now have your adolescent pubescent family group, because now you're getting hormone releases and looking for people who match your value systems. Do you like what I like? Are you willing to like what I like? Can I influence you to like what I like? That's a little harder to do in your family unit. A lot of times when you're in a family unit, they're going to tell you what to like, not ready to be influenced by one another to try different things. They have their family stuff kind of put together. But now you're exposed to new people and you have the opportunity to explore new territory and determine fence lines. So a lot of prefrontal cortex development is about establishing decision-making processes and learning judgment, value judgment. Is that a good behavior? Is that a bad behavior? How does the value judgment given by people I like who aren't my family align with my family? So you're doing a lot of comparisons, and we can go back to what we talked about in the last episode on Bloom's taxonomy of how comparing two things is an important process in establishing knowledge in the brain. And there's just a ton of things happening in puberty. What's fascinating about this development is, as we find, there's a National Center for Biotechnology Information as part of the National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, that has another great article I will link. And it talks about adolescence across species. Right? So it says developments in the brain relate to important features of adolescence, not only among humans, but also among other mammals. The gradual transition from dependence and immaturity to relative independence and maturity is one that virtually all mammalian species experience. Humans and other species need to develop the skills necessary to survive as adults and reproduce. During this transition phase, mammals experience many hormonal and physiological changes, such as growth spurts and puberty. They tend to display certain behaviors that are typical of the age. It makes, this is me now not reading, it makes a lot of sense for creatures in this stage of development to be taking risks, to be determining value judgments, and trying to decide. I mean, what easier way is there to safely determine the value of a thing than to gamble with it? How valuable is this? I don't know. Let's put it at risk and see. So you've been told that money is valuable. Okay, I will bet money on this game of chance. Oh no, I lost my money. How bad do I feel? What value did that have for me? And so there are informational pathways being formed in adolescent brains that help them to determine the value of things, which in turn goes back to a fundamental aspect of what human brains learn from gaming, which is resource allocation, which was not only important to primitive humans when it came to how many hours of daylight can I afford to put into tracking an animal that appears to be getting stronger and not weakening. That's resource allocation. And games can give us the ability to do that. We're talking a lot about adolescence. Gambling shows up, risk-taking behavior shows up in juvenile humans, adult humans, older humans. It's not just adolescent. It continues to generate access to new information. It continues to challenge our awareness of what skills we possess, and also kind of challenges our willingness to lie to ourselves, and at the same time, our willingness to believe our own lies. When faced with a circumstance that requires no skill, and we are still unable to accept that we simply lost. No. The machine, what the brand new machines, man, they never pay out. Don't go to the new ones. Don't go to the one that's been getting played all day. You think it might be full of money, but it's not, right? What I want to look at actually is the University of Pennsylvania article. Where is that one? Risk-taking behavior has a signature in the brain. So this is a group of people who looked at older adults. They started with a data set from the UK Biobank. So what we have is Gideon Nave, an assistant professor of marketing in UPenn's Wharton School, says people have different tendencies to engage in behavior that risks their health or that involve uncertainties about the future. So they're looking at this question of what makes one person drive above the speed limit while another one navigates steadily in the right lane. What motivates someone to leave a job with a steady paycheck to launch their own business? Oh, just at me next time, damn it. Um, Crikey. I may not have read that sentence before I chose this article. So Nave got together with University of Zurich professor. They're revealing how genetic disposition, when they want to reveal how genetic disposition toward risky behavior is embodied in the brain. My hypothesis is it comes with the brain. It's baked in. We risk to learn. It's a risk to learn. We would not be eating mushrooms or chilies at all as humans. A lot of the things that we eat, we would not be eating if there were not risk takers in early human civilizations. Figuring out that if you cook this thing, it's not deadly, but if you don't cook it, it is. There's some dead risk taker. There's the skeleton of a risk taker back in the human record that we don't know about because it wasn't written down. Sometimes it was, but let me pull up the slide for this one. There we go. The article is entitled Risk-Taking Behavior Has a Signature in the Brain. It's UPenn Health Sciences. Again, I'll put all the links in the Discord and hopefully in the description of the YouTube video. So I'll just read this. We can break it down. The current work of these two scientists trying to figure out, is there a biomarker in the brain that shows some trackable essence of risk-taking behavior? Who's predisposed to it, who's not? The current work benefits from a robust data set, the UK Biobank, which has biomedical data from 500,000 volunteer participants between the ages of 40 and 69. Nice. It's obligatory. Don't at me. To get an overall metric of risky behavior, the researchers looked at 4 self-reported behaviors: smoking, drinking, sexual promiscuity, and driving above the speed limit. These behavioral measures were aggregated to create an overall indicator of risk tolerance. To drill down on the connections between genes, brains, and risk tolerance, the researchers used data of 12,675 people of European ancestry from the UK Biobank and began looking at relevant information. They first estimated the relationship between total gray matter volume across the brain and the risk tolerance score. Even while controlling for a variety of factors, including total brain size, age, gender, handedness, excessive alcohol consumption, and genetic factors related to population structure, they found that higher risk tolerance was correlated with overall lower gray matter volume. Gray matter consists of most of the main cell bodies of neurons in the central nervous system and is understood to carry out the basic functions of the brain, including muscle control, sensory perception, and decision making. So this should be the article where they, is this the one? No. There, who had the, oh, that was the brain structures, adolescence across species, had the white matter. So the difference between gray matter and white matter is white matter in the brain is made up of collections of axons that are myelinated. So axons that are insulated by a fatty substance that appears white. It is thought that the myelination enhances transmission of signals across the brain. So it's a white matter is a reinforced, more advanced structure And where is the... Pardon me. Researchers have also documented an increase in the death of neurons and their support cells. So this is one of the things that happens during pubescent development. Yeah, I could probably put this on screen. I'm going to hate to blind you, but let me bring this up on the OBS. Okay. Another reason I love scholarly articles is there's nothing flashing in the margins. Okay, so Spear pointed out up here, basic structures are relatively ancient. In the second paragraph over here, this is where we were talking about the death of neurons and the support and their support cells. That is one of the functions that happens in adolescence. It's so let's start with this. In the above paragraph, they're talking about a decrease of up to 50% in the number of synaptic connections among neurons. Can we read this? There we go. Researchers have found, for example, a decrease of up to 50% in the number of synaptic connections among neurons in different regions of the brain during adolescence. A decrease. So most of your pre-adolescent brain development is about connect the dots, connect the dots, connect the dots. That's the synaptic connections among neurons. In adolescence, that decreases. So here, in general, researchers think that an overproduction of synapses occurs early in life because you're connecting all the dots. You don't know what they mean. These two things happen at the same time. This smell, this sensation, this flavor, this food. So adolescence is when you start pruning. Anybody who's ever had a fruit tree, you understand this process. The pruning that occurs during adolescence is thought to be more selective than earlier pruning based on a use it or lose it principle. And I think that's what reinforces the risk-taking behavior. Is that big enough? I don't see it. On OBS as the right. Do I need to re-access that window? Nope. OBS just is not going to capture it. Okay, it won't, OBS won't increase the size. So a use it or lose it principle that's helping you to learn what branches to prune in order to retain the best value for the least effort is going to necessarily involve risk-taking. And it contributes to the fine-tuning of the brain connections necessary for adult cognition. Going on to say, it is also possible this stage of pruning provides an important opportunity for the brain to be molded by the individual's environment. Once again, we go back to what we said previously about the brains of infants being capable of learning any language. Babies babble almost identically across linguistic barriers. One of the things that defines humans is we are born incredibly flexible. Our brains are super flexible. And it's through this process of connecting the dots, and then you imagine just drawing a line between dots. And the more often you draw the line, the darker and deeper that line gets. Those are the connections you're going to need. Just like the branches of a tree growing thicker and producing more leaves and having the potential to produce more flowers and fruit. Anything that's not getting bigger is going to need to be pruned. So this is where I was going, talking about gray matter and white matter. And then we're going to need to probably wrap up for today, and I will continue this on our next episode. Researchers have also documented an increase in the death of neurons and their support cells, which is likely to be associated with a decrease in gray matter and an increase in white matter. The white matter is important because it helps to quickly connect distant regions of the brain. So now you're not just going around dots that are close to each other. You are connecting distant regions of the brain, and it also supports the emergence of adult type thinking. Gambling is, in my postulation, an inherent structure, an inherent behavior. We are born taking risks. So if I can be allowed the idea that games in their most basic form, I'm going to play a game by telling a joke. Gambling in its most basic form is for the person I tell the joke to. They're gambling that those moments they pay attention to me will have a payoff. And they'll get a little surprise at the end. Because by the time I get to that third, man walks into a bar on the third day, and there should be a twist or a scrap of new information, a little dopamine swelling surprise, little fireworks of dopamine go off in the brain. And if you've never seen the video of the guy who does the magic trick for the orangutan, and its response is very similar to a human response, and it shows surprise and it shows delight. It doesn't get angry. Surprise and delight. So the connection between games, brains, and gambling, I believe, goes back to human origins. These are things that are hardwired in our brain, and without them, we would not learn. But that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Your mileage may vary. I cannot I cannot make you accept my hypotheses, but I do love exploring these things. It just makes me ridiculously happy to take time and examine these things and put my mind to them and invite you to come with me, because I believe that games are critical to humans. If we're going to continue to be a viable species in this world and not return to being just a bunch of dumb primates, then we need to keep playing games. We need to play games together and resist the urge to relegate gameplay to children, because it has so much more to offer. Now, can all of those things also carry with them elements of risk? You bet. You absolutely bet they can. But does that mean we should eschew them completely because there's an element of risk? No, it means that we need to learn to be more honest with ourselves. And I hope if you pull nothing else out of this, part of our self-deception conceit is that studies show humans are willing to ascribe a certain level of skill when they succeed. So there are people who, due to the mere fact that by random happenstance they were successful, they will attribute that state to their skill, even if it was random happenstance. Now, do with that what you will. I should be back with a second installment on this episode, Games, Brains, and Gambling, in 2 weeks. Next week on Grandma's Games Lab, we are going to look at dice games, some of the earliest games humans ever played. Card games might predate dice games. We don't know. Cards were less likely to survive. Dice were usually made of knuckle bones, clay, or stones, and cards were not. So I don't think there's any benefit to be gained by determining which one was better than the other. But at this moment, we are going to run away. Next week, every Wednesday, we're here on Grandma's Games Lab. Come join us. We're going to look at dice. I would like to also, we're going to look at Ship Captain Crew and possibly Farkle, but I definitely want to look at poker dice because I'm not going to talk about poker and chess and the most common games out there in the world. Everybody, if you don't know, it's so easy to find out more about those games. I'd like to talk about games that you are less likely to run into, but I feel like poker dice gives us an opportunity to really talk a little bit more about probability. And I promise not to get boring. And if I do, well, you're just going to have to show up and ask me questions and rip me out of it. Because, like I say, I almost went to become a statistician. I had my college picked out and everything. So, yeah. Thank you very much for joining me. And hopefully I will see you next week. We'll be on Tabletop Simulator running some dice games and talking about how different dice games can be strategies and other ones can simply be, that's just a chance. So how can you roll dice strategically? Well, let me tell you. Next week. Thank you for joining me. I will see you next time on Grandma's Games Lab. Bye!